We may not be able to get in on the sporting action like we used to, but we can get in on some exclusive offers from Renault. To celebrate their third year as official car partner of the GAA, Renault is offering a range of special offers exclusive to all GAA club members. So now you can take home the win right to your door. Check out Renault.ie/GAA to find out more.
With Renault, official car partner of the GAA, taking the passion of a nation to a whole new gear.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen between them, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you, that there won't be a cow milk in County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show sponsored by Renault. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville and by the former Kerry footballer and manager Éamonn Fitzmaurice. In the late evening after Tyrone beat Donegal in the Ulster semi-final, I got a text from my good friend from Omagh, Larry Strain, the manager of the Omagh football team. It simply said, Monaghan, Kerry, Mayo, Sam. Now, I laughed when I got the text and I pitied the fool and I sent him back an unrepeatable text in reply. But Larry's text now reads like a poem, and it turns out that Larry is a bit of a visionary and I should have been paying more attention to him over the last few decades. So, Oisín, I want to start with you with a very simple question. When did you realise that Tyrone were going to win the All-Ireland Football Championship?
Just thinking, the pity you hadn't shared that text message with myself and Éamonn and a few of the boys. We've got to get our predictions maybe a little bit.
Yeah, a small bit better.
But yeah, a small bit better. I tell you the truth, Paul, at the time when I watched the match, believe it or not, I just kept saying to myself, Mayo's going to have a purple patch. Mayo will start, completely destructing this Tyrone defence and start picking off scores at will. And I wasn't sure if that was going to win them the game, but I was sure it was going to go right down to the wire. And you have to go back. I had to go back and I had to watch it again to realise that all things being equal, it was a fairly comfortable win for Tyrone, even though they really struggled to score at all, and they had some chances at the start of the second half. But I think when McShane's goal went in, I think that for me I didn't think there was any way back. I think it gave Tyrone the opportunity to shore up the defence and make sure they didn't give away any goals. And again, it was just a masterclass in seeing out a game, I thought. The one thing when you're thinking Mayo's going to get back into the game and it's going to become a bit more tattered than it already was, the one thing you think is visions of Donegal game, the visions of the Monaghan game and the Kerry game, where towards the end of the game, they're able to break a pace. Like a couple of times they did it against Monaghan, should have ended up with goals. One of the occasions was the one where Bagan comes in, strips the ball off Matty Donnelly. So you think they're going to get some breakaway scores. So you think that Mayo need to be well up in the game. The stats after the game were pretty mediocre on both sides. As far as, when I say mediocre, more or less true to form of most. You could be reading the stats almost from any sort of game over the last 12 months, more or less. The one that stands out for me is the Mayo scoring chances. They had 48 attacks, 31 shots, and ended up with 15 points. It's not even 50%. That's nowhere near where you need to be. Tyrone were marginally better in that area, but also I just thought the forwards just showed a lot of class. I think in a team where there's a nice spread of scores, I still think you need one forward that's going to score quite heavily. McCurry finished at 1-4, and for me that was more or less the difference between the two teams. I know we'll get on to talk about Mayo later, but Tyrone looked like a team who were going to follow their plan right through to the end, regardless of what the situation was, how many goals, chances they coughed up, whatever. They were just going to see it out in the fashion that had done them no harm up to now. So, yeah, it was. Let's face it, like only for Ronaldo scoring 2 on Saturday was a dark day for anybody from Armagh.
Éamonn, you didn't go to the homecoming, Oisín, by any chance, did you? Was it a good evening?
I didn't make the homecoming, but it was in the Armagh City Hotel, believe it or not, in Armagh City. So there you go.
You had every chance. So, Éamonn, when did you realise that Tyrone were about to win or going to win?
I think after the second goal, Paul, I said that's it for Mayo, because before that, similar to Oisín, I expected that there would be some response from Mayo. You know, in the semi-final against Dublin, I think they were still 5 down well into the 62nd, 63rd, 64th minute, and they rallied. So I expected something from them. But again, when you look back at it, you know, who was going to rally for them at that stage. And, you know, it was a big difference that when you have Derek Hanavan and Cathal McShane coming in to see out the game for you, Mayo didn't have that quality and caliber of player to come in and drive it on late in the game for them. So I think when the second goal went in, that was it. I knew that Tyrone were going to see it home from there.
It's interesting, though. I know, Oisín, you were saying that Tyrone it was a comfortable win for them, but Mayo had 4 brilliant goal chances, and we're not talking about half chances, but full on kind of you're bulling if you miss them type of chances. Aidan O'Shea and Conor Loftus in the first half, Tommy Conroy and Ryan Donoghue in the second half. We're not even talking about other chances like the foul on the edge of the penalty area and Brian Walsh going through where there was a slip pass for another goal. So, but 4 real chances.
Yeah, no, the missed chances were incredible. The Aidan O'Shea one, people keep telling me it's an open goal. Like I don't know if there's anybody stronger physically and definitely physically in the GA, and he had this perfect opportunity to put McNamee in his arse and go on ahead and finish the game. But look, it was just really poor football. It was really poor football at the top end of the field. The decision making was really poor, and when you consider that they had the opportunities, I think that makes it even worse when you consider that how Tyrone, you know, seen out the last 7 or 8 minutes of the game. But I think the goal chances, you know, were, as you say, were gilt edge chances. We're not clutching at straws thinking, you know, there was a half chance here or a half chance there. The penalty situation is another one. I've been in that situation and missed one at that end of the pitch. Éamonn was there that day. I missed one on that side of the pitch, but I've never seen O'Donoghue take the stuttered run up before. He usually just steps up. He's hugely confident in the way he tucks away penalties, but look, it just didn't seem. They didn't seem to have the same energy or anything else. Like regardless of the goal chances, like it just didn't seem as if the energy was there. And I think it wouldn't have took a big pile more to make a serious game of it. If we
talk, Éamonn, about the difference in Tyrone this year compared to previous years, what changes did the management make?
Yeah, I think they made a couple of changes. I suppose just talking about the goal chances as well, Paul, I just felt that similar to what Oisín said there, just the decision-making and the skills of the Tyrone players when it came down to the goal chances, they were better. The thing I spotted when I was watching it back last night, when Con Kilpatrick actually catches that ball, and I think the lads referred to it in the Saturday game, the night show, the coverage about not taking the mark. But if you actually watch back, Derek Hanavan roars at him as he catches the ball, and I'd say he's telling him play on, you know. And now maybe Con Kilpatrick would have anyway. And Derek Hanavan, Tony Lean referenced it in his piece as well. The run that he makes in the lead up to the goal to attract the Tyrone defenders to open it up for McCurry, whereas, you know, normally a forward is saying, I need to get in the end of this and score. It was just brilliant play in the smarts, and the 2 late scores that they got as well. Derek Canavan's point, it was a left-handed punch over the bar. McCurry's point, it was a right-handed punch over the bar. Their skills and those fundamentals were just on the money. Whereas the Tommy Conroy shot, we'll say for argument's sake, it was a poor skill execution, and Aidan O'Shea was wide open in the middle for one of those palm-ins. So, you know, when you're talking about the differences and the margins, though, it still comes down to your skills and getting the fundamentals right with your decision making. But in terms of the difference, I think the big difference for me is just that they've done away with permanent sweepers. Their help defence, I referenced it in my own piece this morning, I think is just outstanding. It's at a really high level.
Yeah, what do you mean by a help defence?
I mean that they're marking men, but then when there's danger, they're identifying where the danger is. They're getting there fast, in 2s, in 3s. They know when to leave their men. They know when to go to the point of danger. And when they leave their own men, you rarely see them getting caught out in an overlap. Takes a huge amount of coaching, huge amount of communication, huge amount of trust, huge amount of individual and collective game smarts. And, you know, the whoever was doing that coaching, whether it was the 2 lads themselves or Joe McMahon or Donnelly or Colin Holmes or whoever was doing it, they were really well coached in that regard. And it's hard to get that right. It was something we were working on last year, and we didn't quite get it to the level, the Tyrone level that was shown at the last day, and it was something we were trying to do. So I appreciate how difficult it is to do that, and it was very impressive. I think that was one big thing. Obviously, the going long from kickouts and being willing to kick the ball more is a big change. And I think, as well as giving them a different type of structure, it meant that they had energy at the end of the games. The way that they played in the closing years of the Mickey Harty era against the better teams, it was an exhausting game to play, getting so many bodies back, then trying to counter-attack with the same bodies up and down the field all day. In the last 10 minutes, they often ran out of juice. It was just impossible to sustain that against the top teams. Against the easier teams, or against the teams that they'd be expected to beat, it was a bit easier because they were able to keep them pushed in and they weren't up and down the field as much. But against the better teams, they were up and down the pitch so much. They were worn out by the end of games. That's when the mistakes crept in. That's when they lost games. So I think that's been a big change as well. While they've been subtle changes, they've had a huge impact on them.
Oisín.
I just think that the intent was there to make bigger changes, and I think they realised that they're probably running out of time. When you consider, you know, I suppose after the Cavan game, which a game they would have expected, but the funny thing is that Cavan's setup against them was actually perfect and caused them problems for 15 or 20 minutes. But Cavan just didn't have the bodies and the expertise and the panels to see the game plan through. But there was definitely a blueprint there as far as competing and getting on top of them. But I think when you change the intent, I think there becomes a freshness with the setup first and foremost. I think there's a lot more leeway with the setup as far as maybe what goes on after games or between games, and I think there's more of an ownership now. I think with what is happening in Tyrone as far as the input of players. I think there's a lot more communication between players, management. There's a lot of buffer zones there between Dooher and Logan and the rest of the boys. You've got Collie Holmes, you've got Joe McMahon, you've got Pete Donnelly, who have all played at a high level. Some of them would have played with Peter Hart. You know what I mean? So there is a buffer zone and there's a communication there that maybe wasn't there beforehand. And I just think that when a new manager comes in, it brings excitement. It doesn't really matter who it is, but it brings excitement because the tendency is that there's going to be new things happening. Training changes a little bit, the structure changes a little bit. what's expected of you changes a little bit. Like they've shown faith in Darren McCurry. They played him in every game. They've never taken him off, and that's exactly what he needed. They just said, "Listen, Darren, you're our man, and we're going to see it through with you." And that's exactly what they did. And let's face it, they pinned their hopes on somebody who has huge quality and has delivered for them time and time again. I still think that at the end of the day, when within the GAA, I see a lot of players who are heavy scorers the whole way up, get to senior level and want to be a creator. I still think there's room for some lad who's just out and out selfish, who just wants to get scores, and he sorted out the free taking problem as well. I mean, like I said last week, don't want to keep repeating it, but I said last week about their average from their stats from frees. They were down at 40%. Now they're up at 90. Like, that's an unbelievable turnaround, and that's just one of the small fundamentals. But look at it's a massive thing, and when you're in that situation, you get fouled, you kick the ball over the bar, and you're able to put a little bit of pressure on the opposition kickouts from those set piece plays. It just makes a world of difference, and it's another small piece of the jigsaw. And I think they got a lot of those pieces correct. But I just think just a renewed enthusiasm. Players just wanted to play, and we're playing in different roles, and they just mix it up a little bit. There was nobody seemed to be on the major constraints. I mean, the full back line was able to get up and get scores. I'm not saying that in the previous regime that they were told they weren't allowed to get up and get scores, but probably because of the way they played, maybe there wasn't that opportunity wasn't as plentiful. But certainly, they seemed like a team that I think they're a team who we watched. I said it on Saturday night. I think they're a team that we watched grow during an All-Ireland final, believe it or not. You know what I mean? I still think that, they're not. I don't think they're the finished article by any manner of means, but I still think that they were a team who are continuing to improve, and as I say, we watched them improve. And a lot of times, as a team, you don't get that opportunity to win All Ireland while you're still, in what do you want to call it, transition or change, or and still in the stages of improvement. Not a lot of teams win the All Ireland like that, but I still think that there's probably more to come from Tyrone, as in, there's a lot of areas that I still think that they can improve on.
Éamonn, there's a thing that Brian Dooher said yesterday or Saturday about why wait a year or two is what he was thinking. Is this idea of, like, let's go after this in the first year. And almost always it doesn't seem plausible. But there's a sense to that first year of management being a real opportunity.
100%, Paul. Sure, we would have been the same in my first year, and we came up short. You're absolutely going to be going all out first. What's the point in being there otherwise? I think, in fairness to both Brian Dooher and Fergal Owen, they have a very good balance of humility and confidence. And if you have that as the two main leaders of a group, you're in a good place straight away. Now, Mickey Hart was the very same. He was humble, and he would have been confident in his own abilities. But in terms of having two leaders like that in charge of a group, that's going to promote growth straight away. But absolutely, you'd expect nothing else from Brian Dooher. He's played in 3 All-Ireland finals. Well, he played in 4, I suppose. He played in 95 as well, and won 3 of the 4. He would have looked at the players at his disposal. He would have known them well from the under-21 time, and he would have said, look, we have a group here that's capable of doing something. And, particularly with the straight knockout, it was going to mean that if one of the other big teams had a blip, they weren't going to get another bite at it. And in fairness to them, they were excellent, when you look back at it all the way through the championship.
Both of you have used a series of words there to describe Tyrone over the last 15 minutes or so, and you've used the word smart, and you've talked about game sense, and you've talked about decision making. Is that something that can be coached, or is it something that players, it's almost innate to a player that they develop it themselves?
It both, I'd say, Paul. I think, look, the more innate players that you have that are going to make the right decisions, the better. But in terms of the way that you're training, in terms of the way you analyze games afterwards, highlighting to players how they could have made a better decision, when they do make the better decision the next time, reinforcing it and showing them making the right decision. You can certainly coach it and work on it, but like what Derek Hanavan did for the second goal, that's innate, and it's pretty hard to coach that. What Conor McKenna did for the second goal is innate. You can get it into a fella, but to do it under those circumstances, that's that is a top player. But certainly you can absolutely coach fellas, and I think the thing that any coach would say, there's no problem making mistakes, but making the same mistakes all the time is the thing that would drive you insane. And you do come across players like that no matter how many times you show them something or you tell them to do it a certain way or you advise them to do it a certain way, when it comes to the crunch, they're still going to make the same mistake. So you have innate, you have coachable, and you have uncoachable, Paul. How's that?
And what is the answer with the uncoachable?
Get rid of him. No, look, I think the uncoachable is often going to bring other strengths, and
yes.
Is it the coach's job then to make sure that you're using them in a situation and in a manner that gets the most out of them? And I think, again, that's a big part of coaching and management, that you look at what they can do rather than what they can't do. And if you can get the most out of what they can do, oftentimes they'll certainly be able to perform some role for you.
What do you think, Oisín?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of game intelligence there. I think there's a lot of that middle eight have come through. Different styles of coaching. I suppose they've experienced different styles of coaching. There's a couple of them would have played on the Paddy Tally for that Sigerson Cup team, and they were coached to within an inch of their lives in order to win.
In St. Mary's, was that? Were they in St. Mary's?
Yeah, they were in St. Mary's, and like as I say, they were coached within an inch of their life. I think the one that stands out for me is the McShane one, because he spent that season being the majority of that season and probably the start of his inter-county career as a working left half, right half forward. Somebody who in the defence, link the play. They tinker with him in the middle of the field. To be honest, when I first looked at him at that stage, like I wouldn't say uncoachable, but he was raw. And like the way he's turned his game around and ended up one of the top forwards in the country and a free taker. I mean, like that's an unbelievable turnaround what he has done. But I just think that the majority of those guys are coachable, and I think that they've seen different varieties of coaching. As I say, a lot of them have been coached by Paddy Tally to win an inch of their life, and had to be. In order to, the collective, that was what won the Sigerson Cup, was that collective. I think you had McGeary, you had Myler, you had McShane, one or two others. So, they've experienced that. A club football in Tyrone would be highly competitive. You're talking about all well-coached, well-drilled teams. So this is nothing new to them. They're not going into a county setup and it's like, whoa, too much information. Like they're sponges for that information, and they have with Collie Holmes in particular. I think they have somebody who thinks about the game in a way that suits the way they want to play football. And as much as Carol Kane did a piece in the paper in the Irish News last week, and he basically rubbished the claims that that they had suddenly turned into a kicking team, that they had kicked the ball twice as much on the Mickey Hart and all those sort of things. But that's different. Football has changed a little bit, but also, as I say, the intent. Okay? The first two balls that they got against Monaghan, they just launched them in on top of Matty Donnelly and he scored a point. And Monaghan, for the rest of that kept Monaghan honest for the rest of that game. And so the teams knew that the intent was there. it's very easy if it's continuous running game. It's very, very easy to mark. Like even the one Conor Myler kicks in on top of McShane. Like a lot of time that ball is turned over. And I think 12 months ago or 18 months ago, the tendency would have been to recycle the ball and hold on to it. And I think they picked their opportunities. And that's why on Saturday evening when Ryan O'Donoghue, for his performance in the final, was getting a little bit of stick, at least he was trying things. Do you know what I mean? And they didn't always come off, and he didn't end up having a great game, but he was trying things, and it was going to take somebody to break away from the norm for Mayo to do that. But Tyrone had players that were able to do that. Like Éamonn's after highlighting, a couple of little nuanced things that they did, the runs, the vision from McKenna, Canavan's point, McCurry settling for a point, all those little things, add up at the end of a game, and I think the smarts all lay with Tyrone as far as the way they constructed their performance. It wasn't perfect, as I already said, but the way they constructed the performance, and like for a long time, for 11 minutes, there was no real rhyme or reason to what was happening in the game. And then all of a sudden, the first piece of set play football was when Tyrone got everybody back, turned over the ball, went up the top of the field and scored a point. And you go, right, that's, Tyrone are now in a zone in a comfort zone where, they'll love if it keeps materialising like this. I never dreamt that it would, but that's the way it sort of materialized from now.
And the other thing, Oisín, on the McShane goal for Myler to put in the ball is that if they were playing with their sweeper/double sweeper system, Mayo would have had a body there. But the fact that, that they were playing man-to-man at the back, obviously they were still getting bodies back, tackling back and helping, but there wasn't a permanent sweeper there for Mayo then. So again, there's all these little knock-on effects all over the pitch. The ball, Myler might have looked in and the ball wouldn't have been on, whereas a one-on-one situation was there because they couldn't have the permanent sweeper station there. So I think, again, like you said, that word intent, it's a great way of looking. When you change your intent and you change your whole attitude, it changes everything, really.
And the one Paul that Éamonn's talking about the help defence, Conroy loves the lane. He loves trying to get down the lane. He turned McNamee a couple of times, tried to get down the lane. And you see, whether it be Frank Burns, whether it be Milo, whether it be Sludden, when he turns back, he's in trouble straight away, and he's having to put the ball in the ground to try and kick it out to the wing, and like it's soul destroying when you're playing against that, and they'll let you know about it. Believe me, they'll let you know that they've just turned over the ball, and you get a wee push, and you get all those things, and that's where it's their defensive play and their turnovers is where I know we've said it over the last couple of weeks, but that's where they really get their energy from. And when you see that at the top end of the field, you realise that as a forward, you're going to get more chances maybe than that's another thing. You know what I mean? I remember, people talking about Dublin, particularly in the Bernard Brogan era, about, I did a comparison one time with Bernard Brogan and Conor McManus, and I think Bernard Brogan got 1-7, and I think he had like maybe 15, 16 chances. And Conor McManus was playing in Ulster the same weekend, and he got 6 points, and he had 6 chances. Do you know what I mean? And that's just, and I think the Tyrone forwards are now, they had to be, like Darren McCurry was getting 6 chances in a game, and maybe he was kicking 3 of them wide, 3 points, and all of a sudden he's been hauled off, and his confidence was in his ankles. Now, he's getting a lot more chances, and he's getting the opportunity to convert them. And when you're like that as a forward, there's another chance coming along shortly. You're just not as anxious on the ball or anything else. And I think that's definitely helped them as well.
I think you're right about team selection as well, in terms of leaving Darren McCurry in. But I also think where players were placed on the field was very, very smart. Like, I think Matty Donnelly's a really good footballer, and he worked inside for them. But when Matty Donnelly played out the field, I think he used to slow up their attacks an awful lot. He'd always take a player, he'd turn back inside and he'd beat a player. Whereas now, inside, when he does that, he creates a scoring opportunity, like the point he got for himself in the first half. I've been trying to work out what to say about Mayo, and been really struggling or what to ask about Mayo and really struggling to get the tone right on it, because I think some of the things that have been written about one particular Mayo player and indeed about the general integrity or culture of the team, I find them deplorable, to be honest. And I also find the whole Mayo bottled it analysis to be shallow. But I am finding it hard to get the tone right. And if I'm really honest, it's because I'm disappointed for them and disappointed for Mayo people, disappointed for the players, disappointed for James Horan. But the simple truth is, Mayo were not good enough on the day. And Éamonn, in what ways were they not good enough?
Oh, yeah, look, I'm the same as you, Paul, to be honest. I've been struggling. I don't know what to think if you're a Mayo player, if you're James Horan. I've been there. I felt very sorry for him, I have to say, on Saturday evening. What did they get wrong? They didn't perform. They didn't. Tyrone had their. Just look, when you win in All Ireland, we're talking about the small details there from a Tyrone perspective. Tyrone got all those right, and they deserve huge credit for that. Mayo got the details wrong, and a lot of it was their execution more so than anything else. And you can examine that inside out, upside down from their own perspective. The one thought I did have about Mayo, and I've been, like I said, I've been struggling to think, what can you actually say about them? In one way, they'd have been better off if Dublin had beaten them, because I think it's just repeatedly getting to finals and not seeing it out is the killer stuff. When James Horan took over that team originally in his first stint, he transformed them from a team with a soft underbelly into a beast and a hard physical group that were hard to get the better of. Obviously, until you get to an All-Ireland final, has been their Achilles heel. So he realised at that time he took over the team originally what was needed to take them from where they were, which was nowhere, to becoming this team that we know where they are now, and they're so close to winning an All-Ireland. But there's a missing link, and there's a chink, and he's a bright guy. He's going to have to try and figure that out, because if they keep doing what they've done, they're not going to get there. And, you know, like, you can talk about the technical side, you can talk about the lack of variety in attack, you can talk about the lack of a half-forward line because they're up and down the field the whole time. You can look at all those things, but there's something else. There's something missing. And James Horan needs to figure that out this winter. What is that missing piece and that missing chink? And I think he can figure it out, but until they do, they're not going to win the All-Ireland.
Oisín, what is that missing piece?
Really don't want to go down the cliched route here. I do think that when the shit was hitting the fan, I didn't see anybody particularly standing up.
Lee Keegan.
Well, I was going to get on to the point that, you know, it's okay having leaders defensively, and I think they have a few.
Stephen Cohen was really good.
Yeah, Stephen Cohen was really. But I'm not even talking about who was good and who wasn't really good. I'm talking about, you know, who consistently is going to lead you. I think Keegan, yeah, definitely he answers that call. I think Oisín Mullen is as that sort of ilk, and O'Hara is something similar by the way he does things. There's just like an heroic sort of element to him. But I think you need the leaders need to be, you know, in different areas of the field. And I think whenever you are a little bit rudderless from the middle of the field up, I think it takes somebody just to stop the play, to have a word, to do whatever. I think Cillian O'Connor definitely was a huge miss. Like, everybody talked about, will he be a big miss because he's scoring heavily because of free kicks? Organisation, purely and simply. You know, even just simply on the kickouts, you know, how good he is and clamping that down, and how much he leads from that point of view. And I think they just missed him as just one more outlet. But I think I agree with what Éamonn's saying. I think it probably runs a little bit deeper than that. And I think the big thing when, you know, only played in a couple of All-Ireland finals, but in one of them we just failed to turn up, purely and simply. We still could have won the game, but we purely and simply failed to turn up. And you have to look within. You have to stop looking over at the sideline. You have to look to what's going on the pitch, and what was going on the pitch wasn't good enough, and there was nobody there to call a halt and say, "Well, let's reset and let's go again." There didn't seem to be any point in the game where they had something planned that if the team gets on top of you, let's somebody go down or let's slow the game down or whatever. I mean, Tyrone have that stuff off to a tee. It's small things. I just feel as if I feel personally as if Tyrone are already working on the smaller things, and maybe the smaller things come more naturally to them. I don't know. But I still think that Mayo are always intent on working on the bigger things and have to work on the bigger things, and some of the smaller things, the game management that incorporate game management are being missed, or maybe aren't being worked on as much. And again, for some people, that stuff comes fairly naturally. I would say that it comes very, very naturally. I think it comes first, actually, when you're talking about Tyrone. But I think that it's a little bit behind the door whenever you're talking about teams like Mayo, to be honest, and maybe even Kerry, if you like.
Well, Éamonn.
Geez, I think during my time we were being accused of being a very cynical team, so I don't know.
I swear I'm not talking about your time.
Thanks, Oisín. I look, like I said, James Horan's a bright guy, and I think he's a good guy, and he's done a huge job. He just needs to find that missing piece. Look, he has New Zealand heritage. They were in a place as well once upon a time where they were missing that final piece as well, and when they got that piece right, they became unbeatable. So I don't know. I don't know other than that. I don't know. Like
there's a word, Éamonn, that I kept writing down. I watched the match again last night. I went through the whole thing. The one word that I kept coming up with was accuracy. And I mean accuracy in shooting, but also accuracy in passing, accuracy in the tackle, accuracy basically of execution. There were too many Mayo players, again, when it came to the crunch, were not accurate in what they were trying to do. But does that suggest that there's just a few of them just not good enough? And when the air gets thin, you can't afford to be carrying a couple.
You can't at that level. We used to have an expression one of the years I was involved before the games, when you want to keep the messages very simple, and it was accuracy and discipline put the opposition under pressure. And if you have accuracy in everything you do with the ball, you're very hard to play against because you're not giving cheap turnovers. If you have discipline when the opposition have the ball in terms of the way you're approaching the game, and if you have discipline with your game plan, you're very hard to beat. Mayo, like, I think again it was another line that Tony had in his piece. He spoke about Mayo thrive in chaos, whereas Tyrone crave order, and Tyrone made sure that their order was on that game yesterday, whereas Mayo need that bit of chaos. And when a game becomes chaotic, like the semi-final, when it was wet, when it was frantic, they're brilliant in that. But when that isn't there, then have they a structure that they can rely on, particularly from midfield up. And I think in terms of the technical side of the game and the tactical side of the game that they can fix, that's certainly something that they can work on. But it's still probably a bit more than that. But to go back to your question, Paul, absolutely. Look, accuracy is huge. I referred to the Tyrone skill set earlier on. And, to be a top inter-county footballer, it still comes back to getting those basic things right. That if you're kicking a ball 30 yards to a forward, it's a sympathetic kick outside him. It's hopping up to him. It's not at his ankles. It's not over his feet. You're not making him work for it. It's a hand pass. If you're hand passing to your right side, you can use your left hand. It's going to chest. So yeah, look, there. It doesn't matter what level, whether it's schools or whether it's a club team. They're the things you need to get right. But the higher you go, the more important it is to have those basics on the money.
I want to finish talking about this match, talking about Niall Morgan. I thought Niall Morgan was absolutely brilliant, but in the first couple of minutes, he kicked it. He took a kick out and it didn't cross the 21. It ended up in a throw in, and the crowd around were saying, "Oh, they've got him now. He's under pressure straight away." And he turned out to give a masterful display. Oisín, he must have been very close to being awarded man of the match.
Yeah, he was definitely in the running. There was a few boys other than McCurry as well, although I had nothing to do with picking man of the match. But
who picked it, Oisín? Who picked man of the match?
Pat, Tomas, Sean, and Kevin McStay. So,
and would you agree?
And Éamonn Fitzmaurice as well.
No, I'd no say.
I'm only joking. But
would you pick Aaron McCurry?
Would I?
Yeah.
No, I probably would have picked Kilpatrick, to be honest. I thought on a one-off performance, I thought he was outstanding. Look at Milo was good. McGeary was good. There was plenty of contenders. Hampsey was good. But the thing about I might have even shared this before. Niall Morgan's could have been his second game with
Tyrone.
Yeah, up in Ballybuffet.
Yeah,
and he scored his first free, and he gave it the old hands behind the ears, and what do you think of that sort of thing? And he continued to an absolute nightmare after that. He couldn't hit a barn door, and the more the game went on, the more it affected the other aspects of his game, as in his restarts and his handling and everything. It just completely fell apart, and he doesn't seem to get rattled with that anymore. And I think it has helped him that Tyrone had the intent at different stages in different games that they were going long and they were prepared to lose it. And if they lost it, they lost it. I don't think they seem to get too bogged down in that. To go back to the conversation, Paul, we had with Kevin Walsh when we talked about that overload kick out that Galway used for years. Éamonn, I think against you boys maybe a couple of times as well. And we were talking about how many the raw stats would say we lost more than we won or whatever, but the outcomes of those didn't really damage us that much. And I think it was the same with Niall Morgan. He sort of has a license, but I think there was a point in the game where he wins the ball as basically a sweeper, and he takes a solo and he bombs it 80 yards into the full forward line because he'd recognised it was 2-on-2 in there. And as I say, that's a change of intent, and it's also like a license to make a mistake. So I think he's just matured and he's learned, and he was originally like majorly a soccer background. I know he's always played GAA, but like it looked as if his future was going to be as a goalkeeper in the Irish League, and he changed that. Mickey Hart took him in, and he's been ever present more or less since that. But he's had some shaky moments along the way. But hey, goalkeepers are strange individuals. What goalkeeper hasn't had a bit of a meltdown at different times? But he seems to have sorted that out, and I think a lot of that is to do with the license he's been given and the role he's been given, and the amount of times he was just that extra man just to pick up the ball, create an overlap and right the way up the top of the field, whereas Mayo didn't have that outlet, But he was very close to man of the match. He's also very close to being player of the year as well. He was in the reckoning for that.
Who did you think should have got player of the year? Or do you agree with that one?
Me?
Yeah, who'd you pick?
I picked McGeary.
Yeah. Éamonn?
I picked McGeary as well, Paul, yeah, but Niall Morgan had a massive year. And I think, look, like you said, what's changed about him is that he's mature and experienced now, whereas in the past that little blip at the start might have impacted on him, whereas now he's able to deal with it, and he knows that, goalkeeper is going to make a couple of mistakes. You're not going to win every kick out, but you know, I made the point in my piece again this morning about the way that they've flipped the bias of going short versus long. They went long with 16 of their 25 kickouts, and they won 12 of those, which was a huge percentage. But to go long 16 versus going short 9 shows that they were going out, and it worked very well. It didn't work against Kerry, hadn't worked in some of the earlier games, and they tried it against Monaghan. But you could see at all times that the possibility was there for what materialised on Saturday, where that if they won it high up the field there and moved it away from there fast, there was scores to be got. And, you know, they got a couple of points in the first half, but obviously the goal was the one, and that's what they would have been training for and rehearsing and training all along.
Like, it's like when like, I know when you talk about long kickouts, but his long kickout, like, it's landing the far 45 in Croke Park. Like, it's like the range is phenomenal. But Paul, I was
that's a huge point, Oisín, because only 3 really in the country have that. Him, Began, and Sean Patton. No one else can get it that far, and that is a game changer, being able to get it that far, because if it's still only landing even in the opposition's 65, it's a bit easier to deal with, and it's not game over if you lose it. But when you can get it almost down to the opposition 45, it's huge. Like, and that's probably the kick out being brought out as far as the 20 as well. But it's caught on already. I was at a club match last night, and it was a team playing, and they kicked every single kick out long as they could kick it.
So I have a question about this, and it comes back to the game smarts and game sense that we were talking about earlier. It seemed to me to be obvious by the first water break that that's what Tyrone wanted to do. I don't understand why Mayo didn't then flood the midfield and say to Tyrone, that's grand, we're not getting your short kick out off you anyway, so you can keep kicking it short if you want, but you're still going to have to play through us. So I genuinely cannot understand why they then didn't flood the midfield and say, fine, come up and play through us. We don't think you're Dublin. We don't think you're Kerry. You're not going to play through us.
Yeah, no, valid point, Paul. And I suppose Mayo have got such joy from pressing on the opposition kick out for a long time that they probably felt it would work. And again, if they were managing to win that breaking ball in the middle of the field and move it fast, they had plenty of bodies forward to get scores off. But, you know, like I said, winning 12 of 16 long kickouts gave Tyrone a massive platform in the right part of the pitch. But yeah, absolutely, you could argue that they should have started to withdraw, particularly their half-forward line, to really start getting out under those breaking balls and to crowd the area a bit better. Look, I've been there when. Yeah, it's
easy to say from the sideline.
When you have the good day, everything, like when you have the good day, it is as it was for Tyrone the last day. Everything that you envisage beforehand comes off. Then when you have the bad day, and nothing goes according to plan, and that was Mayo's point the last day.
Another thing on the Mayo side of things now, if we're just looking at them, is that their substitution seemed to be. I thought their substitution was strange. It didn't seem as if at any stage, there was a defined role for a substitute to come in and just sort of change things. Just come on, and they added. I thought they added very little. The timing of the substitutions, and then even some of the personnel that was coming on, I thought was a little bit strange. A little bit. Maybe he was trying to do something from left field just to maybe try and get them going, but they didn't work either.
If we leave it at that in terms of this year, the one thing about sport is the wheel always turns, and Mayo will have another chance next year, and as will every county in the country. I want to turn to next year's championship because it seems to be appropriate to do it 2 days after this one finishes, and we talk about next year. Oisín, who will win the Ulster Football Championship next year?
Go on, man.
Éamonn, who'll win it?
That's if there is one.
I wouldn't disagree. Yeah, the Ulster Championship in March you're talking about now, is it, Paul?
Oh, the McKenna Cup type thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen here? You just would not know what's going to happen here.
I think Armagh will be in the conversation. Have we backed against Tyrone all the way this year, lads, and they're all Ireland.
I went for them to win the Ulster Championship.
We're going against
as much as I get a huge amount of abuse on here.
They're going to grow. They're going to grow for that win, lads. But I can't think that far down the road yet, Paul. We'd have to see a bit of context first.
Okay, well let's imagine. Let's come at this differently then. Who'll win the All Ireland next year?
Do you know what the best thing about it is? If you were asking us that question this time next year, this time last year, we'd have all been saying, look, Dublin are going to be there again. It's up to everyone else to come and take it off them. Whereas the conversation is broadened. Dublin will obviously be back. Kerry will be back in the conversation. Tyrone are there. Armagh, Monaghan are going to and Donegal are all going to love a cut at Tyrone. Mayo will still be there. Can Galway improve from where they were this year? So you certainly have Kerry, Dublin and Tyrone are all going to be big time in the conversation. Then you have the Armagh, Monaghan, Galway group, Mayo, that are all going to be in the conversation as well. So instead of talking about one team, we're talking about 4, 5, 6 teams now, which is good. Usually
when an Ulster team makes a breakthrough like this, after a number of years, it's followed up by somebody else. We remember 91, 92, 93, 94, 2003, 2002, 2003. So I'll go for Kerry.
Éamonn, have you been approached about the Kerry job?
This was about the time in the last podcast that you started setting traps for Jack Paul.
I set no trap. I asked simple questions.
He was lovely and comfortable below in his house in South Kerry, chatting away, and had been very good. And the next thing, then he got himself into a world of bother. I don't know. Look, no, I haven't been approached about the job, Paul. But look, I think from Kerry's perspective, it's been a kind of a messy couple of weeks with all the conversation that's been going on and everything else. And whatever happens, I hope it's sorted in the short term, and it just allows, people to bed down and get focused. We're good at Kerry talking when there's a vacuum, and there's a lot of that going on at the moment. So I think that vacuum needs to be filled.
Do you fancy Kerry for next year?
Oh, big time. Look, I mean, I was thinking about the Kerry players on Saturday night. I was saying they lost an All-Ireland semi-final by a point to the eventual winners in a game that they would have felt they should have won. So they must have been hurting Saturday night. So, yeah, of course, Kerry are going to be big time in the conversation next year, but they have to get it over the line. And until you get it over the line, we said it earlier on the time, the question marks are there until you get it over the line. But certainly the quality is there. Again, no more than Mayo. It's getting that final missing piece and that final percentage or a couple of percentage points that are going to get it over the line. But absolutely, the age profile is good. The quality is good. So we'd be hopeful about the future for sure.
Yeah, and for now, we can say that Tyrone were worthy champions. And again, I'd like to offer my congratulations to Larry Strain for the quality of his prediction in getting there. That's our last show for now anyway. I'd like to say thank you to Larry Ryan for running the podcast, to Raf Rocca for everything he does, to Tony Lean, to Renault, and to everyone at Examiner Sport for making it happen. A special thanks to Éamonn for joining us today. And of course to Oisín. It's been great fun all year. Thanks very much, and we'll be back.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Éamonn.
Thanks, Paul. See you, Oisín.
With Renault, passion for what drives you. Official car partner of the GAA.
A grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to Eden, and now they're really roaring.